The journey begins by inviting viewers into the liminal space between memory and myth. Ancient cultures, long erased from popular history, left traces of stories that speak to universal fears, dreams, and curiosities. We contrast the fading echoes of these civilizations with the vivid life of the myths they created, exploring how forgotten societies expressed human longing, dread, and wonder. This section sets the tone for the documentary, establishing curiosity, calm reflection, and a sense of stepping softly into a world both known and unknowable. Expanded section content. Long before the maps of the modern world were drawn and the histories of empires were recorded in ink and stone, human beings lived in landscapes that seemed boundless, mysterious, and alive. The forests whispered with hidden voices, rivers murmured secrets in their currents, and mountains loomed as silent witnesses to generations of lives both ordinary and extraordinary. In these primal settings, myths were born, not merely as stories, but as living, breathing threads that wove together the seen and the unseen, the tangible and the imagined. The world of forgotten cultures is, by its nature, elusive. Many of these civilizations left behind only faint traces, fragments of pottery, weathered carvings, crumbling temples, or scattered oral tales that have survived by chance. Yet in these fragments lies a remarkable richness. Myths, more than historical records, carry the emotions, fears, and hopes of people long vanished. They offer insight into the way ancient minds perceive the universe, its vastness, its mysteries, and the fragile place of humanity within it. Consider a village nestled at the foot of a misty mountain. Here, generations might have believed that a spirit dwelled in the clouds, governing the flow of seasons or protecting sacred groves. The villagers would perform rituals to honor this being, leaving offerings and telling its stories beside fires at night. While modern observers might dismiss these tales as superstition, for the people who lived them, myths were vital guides. They taught lessons about survival, morality, and the invisible forces shaping their world. In the faint flicker of a torchlight, one could glimpse a universe alive with unseen presences, a universe where each shadow could carry a story. As we trace these whispers of the past, we encounter civilizations whose names are now nearly forgotten. The Indus Valley, which flourished thousands of years ago along the winding rivers of South Asia, left behind cities of remarkable complexity, yet their language and myths remain largely indecipherable. Likewise, the Olmec civilization in Mesoamerica carved enigmatic stone heads and intricate ritual sites, hinting at beliefs and legends now lost to time. In each case, the surviving artifacts are only hints of what these people imagined, feared, and revered. The myths that once animated their daily lives now exist mostly as echoes, waiting for us to listen closely, with patience and quiet attention. What is it about these stories that endures? Perhaps it is the universality of their themes. Even in vastly different lands and eras, humans have grappled with the same profound questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? How do we coexist with forces we cannot fully control? Myths provided a framework for understanding these mysteries. They also offered comfort, a sense that even the darkness of the unknown was not empty, but alive with meaning. The rhythm of night itself seems intertwined with these myths. When the sun sets and the world grows quiet, our ancestors would have gathered around flickering flames, sharing tales of gods and monsters, spirits and heroes. The hush of evening created a space where imagination could thrive. It is in this same quiet space that we now invite our listeners to journey, to step lightly into worlds long past, where every shadow holds a story and every story carries a whisper of the infinite. In exploring these forgotten worlds, we also confront the fragility of human memory. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is lost, sometimes deliberately erased by conquest, other times simply swept away by time. Libraries burn, oral traditions fade, and yet the myths themselves persist, like seeds carried on the wind. Even when a civilization disappears almost entirely, its imagination survives in subtle traces, a motif carved in a stone, a recurring pattern in folklore, a ritual repeated across centuries. Myths are resilient, bending but not breaking under the weight of time. There is a gentle tension inherent in these stories, a push and pull between light and darkness, between what is known and what is hidden. Some myths speak of benevolent guides, of spirits who bring protection, wisdom, or abundance. Others warn of the dangers that lurk at the edge of consciousness, tricksters, monsters, or forces of chaos that challenge human understanding. This duality mirrors the human experience itself. Our lives are a mixture of wonder and fear, clarity and uncertainty, safety and the thrill of the unknown. It is precisely this interplay that makes the myths of forgotten cultures so hauntingly beautiful. As we move through this narrative, we will notice that myths were not static. They evolved with each telling, shaped by the landscape, climate, social norms, and encounters with other cultures. A tale told beside a river might transform when told on a mountain plateau, acquiring new symbols, new lessons, and new shades of meaning. Even when civilizations vanished, these stories were carried forward, sometimes merging with myths from other lands, sometimes resurfacing in the dreams and imaginations of distant peoples. Listening to these whispers requires patience. We cannot rush into understanding them, for much of their power lies in subtlety, in the spaces between words and events. The myths invite quiet observation, contemplation, and gentle curiosity. They unfold slowly, like the opening of a flower in the pre-dawn light, revealing layers of meaning and emotion to those willing to linger and listen. Tonight, as we embark on this exploration, we begin to attune ourselves to the soft murmur of lost worlds. We learn to hear the echoes of civilizations that no longer walk the earth, to sense the heartbeat of imagination that once shaped every corner of human life. Each myth becomes a thread, weaving a tapestry of human experience that spans continents and millennia. Though these cultures are largely forgotten, their stories remain, timeless, haunting, and waiting to be heard once more. In the quiet that follows, we are not merely observers. We are participants in a conversation that has traveled through centuries. By listening, we honor the lives, fears, and dreams of those who came before, while allowing our own minds to drift into the twilight of wonder and reflection. The whispers of forgotten worlds are delicate, but persistent. They invite us to step softly, to notice the subtle textures of imagination, and to feel the resonance of human creativity echoing across time. Thus begins our journey, through shadowed forests, lost cities, and sacred mountains, through spirits, monsters, and gods, through the delicate balance of darkness and light that defines human storytelling. In this first section, we open the door to a realm where myths live not in textbooks or museums, but in the quiet, reflective spaces of the mind. Here, the forgotten is remembered, the unknown is explored, and the night itself becomes a gentle guide toward curiosity, imagination, and eventual rest. This section explores the origins of myths across cultures, highlighting the interplay between human observation and imagination. Myths emerged as ways to explain natural phenomena, encode cultural knowledge, and confront universal fears. By contrasting the light of known reality with the darkness of human uncertainty, we see how early societies wove stories that were simultaneously explanations, warnings, and meditations. The section establishes the idea that myths are both reflections of history and vessels of timeless human insight, preparing viewers for the deeper exploration of spirits, monsters, and forgotten worlds to come. Long before the written word crystallized thought into permanent form, humans relied on stories to navigate the mysteries of their environment. Every sunrise and sunset, every storm and drought, every birth and death demanded explanation, and in these early inquiries, myths were born. They were born from curiosity, from wonder, and from fear, born from the need to give shape to what could not be fully controlled or understood. To the people who first told them, myths were not just stories. They were living, breathing attempts to make sense of the world. Consider the night sky. To an early observer, the stars were not merely distant points of light, but markers of seasons, guides for travel, and symbols of divine presence. Patterns in the heavens were interpreted as signs or messages, and entire mythologies arose to explain the dance of planets and the cycle of seasons. In Mesopotamia, the movements of celestial bodies became intertwined with the stories of gods and cosmic battles. In Polynesia, navigation by the stars was encoded in myth, teaching generations to survive and thrive across vast oceans. These myths illustrate a profound truth. Human imagination has always been inseparable from survival, guiding both practical knowledge and emotional understanding. Across continents, myths emerged in remarkably similar ways. In the dense forests of Europe, ancient peoples told stories of spirits inhabiting the woods, forces that demanded respect or caution. In the deserts of Africa, myths explained the fierce heat, the scarcity of water, and the unpredictable rhythms of life. In each region, the unknown, storms, illness, death, was personified, given a voice, a form, a story. By doing so, communities could negotiate their fears and desires, creating rituals, taboos, and moral codes that reinforce social cohesion. Myth became a bridge between the seen and unseen, the mundane and the sacred. Yet myths are not merely explanations. They are reflections of human consciousness. They emerge from the tension between what is known and what is mysterious, between the observable world and the imagination that seeks to interpret it. In this sense, myths are as much psychological as they are cultural. The trickster figure, appearing in cultures from the Americas to Africa, embodies human cunning, curiosity, and the consequences of breaking social rules. The flood myth, repeated in stories from Mesopotamia to India, reflects both the human awareness of environmental forces and the symbolic need for renewal. Each myth carries encoded lessons, expressing fears, ethics, and hopes in forms that survive long after the societies themselves have changed or vanished. The birth of myth is also inseparable from ritual. Stories were not always told for entertainment. They were performed, enacted, and integrated into the rhythms of daily life. Ceremonies marked the passage of seasons, the growth of crops, or the rites of passage for young people. Through these rituals, myths were reinforced, remembered, and imbued with a sense of sacredness. In some cultures, storytelling and ritual were inseparable from music, dance, and visual symbols, an immersive experience that bound the community together and connected the mundane with the divine. There is also a delicate interplay between myth and observation. Early humans noticed patterns in nature: the changing moon, the migration of animals, the cycles of birth and decay. These patterns inspired stories, transforming empirical observation into poetic narrative. A storm might be explained as the anger of a god, a comet as a messenger from the heavens, a disease as the work of unseen spirits. The stories did not simply describe the world. They shaped how people experienced it, creating a sense of order, purpose, and meaning in the midst of uncertainty. As we look at myths from forgotten cultures, we notice a striking universality. Despite differences in geography, language, and resources, human beings everywhere developed similar structures of narrative: creation stories, hero journeys, tales of morality, and stories of the afterlife. This suggests that myths fulfill fundamental human needs: to understand, to teach, and to imagine. They encode survival knowledge, social rules, and psychological insight, preserving wisdom across generations. In exploring the origins of myth, it is impossible to ignore the role of imagination. Imagination allowed humans to bridge the gap between observation and interpretation, to conceive of worlds beyond the immediately visible, and to communicate complex ideas through narrative. It turned the flicker of a shadow into a spirit, the roar of a river into a divine force, and the pattern of stars into a story that guided generations. Myths became a mirror reflecting both the natural world and the inner workings of the human mind. Even the most terrifying myths have a gentle purpose when seen in context. Creatures that once inspired fear, from serpents to giants, serve to teach lessons about caution, respect, and the consequences of human actions. Ghosts and spirits encoded social norms and ethical boundaries. Tales of gods and goddesses conveyed virtues and the consequences of transgression. In this sense, myths were not meant to frighten indefinitely. They were tools for learning, reflection, and psychological resilience. The creation of myths also reflects the human desire to connect across time. By embedding knowledge and experience into story, early societies ensured that wisdom survived even when direct experience could not. Myths became a form of memory, preserving ecological knowledge, survival strategies, and cultural identity. A young person hearing a story of a cunning trickster or a powerful storm god gained not only entertainment, but also practical and moral understanding. Knowledge passed through narrative that could endure for centuries. We also see that myths evolve. A story told around one hearth may differ subtly from the same story told hundreds of miles away. Over time, myths adapt, absorbing new influences, reflecting changing societies, and reshaping themselves to remain meaningful. This fluidity ensures that myths remain relevant, maintaining a delicate balance between preservation and innovation. In every telling, there is continuity and change, linking generations in an ongoing conversation about the mysteries of existence. By the time we reach this point in our exploration, we recognize that myths are more than entertainment or superstition. They are intricate frameworks for understanding life, death, and the forces beyond human control. They reveal how early humans approached uncertainty with curiosity, imagination, and reverence. They illustrate the human need to make sense of the unknown while remaining open to mystery. In this section, we see that myths emerge from the quiet intersection of observation and imagination, necessity and wonder, fear and hope. As night falls and the mind grows quiet, we begin to sense the gentle pulse of these stories. They do not demand immediate attention, nor do they require answers. They simply exist, carrying the echoes of ancient voices, the rhythms of human thought, and the soft light of imagination. Each myth, like a quiet flame, illuminates the shadowy spaces of history, inviting us to explore not just the world of ancient peoples, but the inner landscapes of our own curiosity and wonder. In the chapters ahead, these stories will lead us further into forgotten civilizations, liminal beings, and mysterious practices. For now, we linger in the place where myths are born, the tension between the seen and unseen, the known and unknown, the safe and the terrifying. Here, in the quiet reflection of history and imagination, we begin to understand that myths are not merely old tales. They're enduring companions for the mind, guiding us gently into contemplation, curiosity, and the soft embrace of night. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where horizons seem endless and the stars hang low enough to touch, there once sailed a people whose myths were carried not on parchment, but on the swell of the sea and the rhythm of their hearts. The Lapita, ancestors of the Polynesians, were master navigators and storytellers, voyaging from island to island across waters that seemed as infinite as the sky above. Their lives were inseparable from the ocean, a living, breathing entity that demanded respect, reverence, and constant attention. To cross it safely required not only skill and courage, but stories, tales of gods, spirits, and omens that guided their hands and steadied their hearts when storms threatened to swallow them whole. In the myths of the Lapita, the ocean itself is alive, and its voice is never silent. There are stories of a goddess who sang the islands into being, her melody threading through waves, coral reefs, and towering palms, shaping land as she moved. To hear the ocean was to hear her song, and to follow it was to navigate life itself. Yet beneath the surface lurked shadows, unseen creatures and spirits that tested the courage of those who sailed. These were not tales designed to frighten, but to teach and protect, embedding in rhythm and repetition the knowledge needed to survive and thrive in a world governed by both sun and storm. The boundary between myth and daily life was permeable. Every wave, every current, every sudden squall was interpreted as a message, a reminder that humans were part of a larger, sentient world. The Lapida people left behind traces of their presence in intricately patterned pottery and carefully laid out settlements, artifacts that speak of both artistry and ritual. Each symbol, each curve of a design, carries a story, sometimes of creation, sometimes of loss, and sometimes of guidance for future generations. These objects were more than decoration. They were vessels for memory, mnemonic devices for myths passed down orally across countless nights. Around nightly fires, elders would chant stories of sea spirits and ancestral heroes, their voices carrying across the open water, as if the waves themselves were listening. In these moments, storytelling was inseparable from life, a conduit through which the mysterious and the practical merged seamlessly. The myths also reflected the duality of the ocean, nurturing and destructive, generous and exacting. While the goddess's song created islands, storms could erase them in an instant, and creatures of shadow could pull the unwary into depths unknown. There was a rhythm to it all, a balance between respect and fear, celebration and caution. In these stories, the Lapida codified an understanding of the world, that survival was not merely a matter of skill, but of awareness, humility, and connection to forces far beyond human control. They imagined their deities and spirits not as distant rulers, but as partners in the ongoing dance of existence, their voices woven into every wave and every gust of wind. As night falls and stars emerge overhead, one can almost feel the invisible network of paths once traversed by these ancient navigators. The constellations were their maps, the ocean their classroom, and myths their compass. To listen to these stories today is to sense the pulse of a people attuned to the unseen, whose lives were dictated not only by survival, but by the poetry of existence itself. The myths invite us into a quiet meditation, a journey across endless horizons where time dilates, and where the distinction between human and spirit, known and unknown, begins to fade. And so, in this oceanic expanse, we drift with the Lapida through waters that remember every footstep of history, every chant carried by the wind, every story that shaped islands in a home. Their myths are a soft current beneath the vastness, guiding us gently, hauntingly, toward understanding, not of the ocean alone, but of the enduring human desire to weave meaning into the vast, unknowable spaces around us. In the hush of night, listening to these ancient tales, we too become voyagers, navigating the gentle yet inexorable tide of memory, dream, and myth. Throughout human history, fear has been a powerful teacher. Ancient cultures, acutely aware of the dangers that surrounded them, created stories that transformed anxiety into guidance. From predators lurking in forests to the capricious forces of nature, these myths encoded lessons meant to protect, instruct, and caution. They were not idle tales told for entertainment. They were living narratives that shaped behavior, instilled vigilance, and maintained social cohesion. At the same time, they carried a delicate poetic quality, blending shadow and light, terror and insight, to captivate the imagination without overwhelming it. Consider the cautionary tales told to children in rural Europe centuries ago. In these myths, wandering too far into the forest could invite encounters with malevolent spirits, while dishonesty or greed might summon punishment from unseen forces. The stories were designed to enforce social norms and protect the vulnerable, ensuring that lessons were absorbed as both narrative and lived experience. And yet, the telling was often deliberate, calm, and atmospheric. The fire crackled, the night deepened, and the tale unfolded slowly, allowing imagination to fill the spaces between words. This slow cadence is precisely what makes such stories ideal for sleep-friendly storytelling, even centuries later. In the Americas, cautionary myths often emerge from direct interaction with the environment. The Aztec and Maya civilizations told of spirits and monsters that inhabited rivers, caves, and mountains. A misstep in sacred or dangerous territory could invoke the wrath of a divine being or the appearance of a lurking creature. These myths served multiple purposes. They warned of physical danger, reinforced spiritual reverence for natural spaces, and preserved knowledge of local geography and hazards. In the retelling of these stories, the imagination was engaged gently, allowing both fascination and caution to coexist. The dual nature of these myths, fearful yet instructive, is a universal pattern. In Africa, stories of night spirits, such as the Tokalash in southern Bantu, folklore warned children against wandering alone after dark, emphasizing caution while reinforcing familial and community bonds. In Asia, tales of yokai or restless spirits carried similar lessons. Respect the living and the dead, obey social codes, and heed the limits imposed by nature and tradition. The darkness is never empty. It is populated with meaning, guidance, and narrative rhythm that encourages reflection rather than panic. The structure of these tales often follows a recognizable pattern. A transgression occurs, supernatural or natural consequences follow, and a moral or practical lesson emerges. A child disobeys a parent and encounters a forest spirit. A greedy villager disregards sacred customs and faces misfortune. A traveler ignores local warnings and is lost to a river or desert. By framing danger within narrative structure, myths convert abstract risks into tangible, memorable experiences. Each tale becomes a mental rehearsal, a safe way to explore fear and consequence while remaining physically unharmed. Cautionary myths are also deeply symbolic. Predatory creatures may represent natural threats, while trickster figures embody the consequences of deceit or hubris. Ghosts or spirits often symbolize unresolved human emotions, anger, jealousy, or grief, teaching that morality and ethical conduct are intertwined with the unseen forces of existence. These layers of meaning allow the listener to engage both consciously and subconsciously, absorbing lessons about survival, behavior, and the rhythms of life without the urgency of real danger. The aesthetic and pacing of these tales are carefully calibrated for engagement and reflection. A story might begin with a serene landscape, a calm river at twilight, a quiet village, or a misty mountain pass. Slowly, an element of unease emerges. A shadow flits through the trees, a whisper rides the wind, a figure appears at the edge of vision. The tension builds gently, never rushing the listener, allowing the imagination to inhabit the space between words. By the time the moral is revealed, the mind is primed for reflection, not alarm, a crucial element for both ancient teaching and modern sleep-friendly storytelling. Some cautionary tales also explore human psychology, projecting inner fears into external narratives. Anger, envy, and desire are often anthropomorphized as spirits or monsters. By externalizing these emotions, myths teach listeners to recognize, respect, and moderate powerful inner drives. A child who sees greed embodied as a forest monster learns both practically and emotionally. The story warns of social and natural consequences while fostering self-awareness. These psychological lessons are timeless, resonating even in modern imagination, quietly guiding behavior and reflection. Another remarkable aspect of cautionary myths is their adaptability. The same story can evolve across generations, absorbing new lessons and shifting to reflect changing circumstances. A tale of a river spirit warning against drowning may later include warnings about disease, fire, or societal disruption. By remaining flexible, myths preserve core truths while addressing new realities, ensuring that lessons remain relevant and potent. They are living narratives capable of teaching, delighting, and gently frightening listeners simultaneously. The balance of fear and comfort is particularly notable in these myths. Even as danger is suggested, a path to safety or redemption is often present. Respect the spirit, obey the elder, or heed the natural signs. Darkness is not meaningless. It is structured, comprehensible, and ultimately surmountable. This delicate equilibrium allows myths to explore deep anxiety without overwhelming the listener, creating a hypnotic, reflective experience suitable for nighttime listening. In addition, cautionary myths often encode practical survival knowledge. Stories of dangerous animals, treacherous terrain, or environmental hazards are woven into narrative form, making them easier to remember. A myth of a giant serpent in a river teaches children to approach waterways with care. A tale of a malevolent forest spirit encourages awareness of local flora, poisonous plants, or hidden predators. In this way, fear is transformed into wisdom, and storytelling becomes an elegant, immersive method of education. The universality of cautionary myths demonstrates their profound resonance. Across cultures and continents, humans have used storytelling to teach, protect, and inspire. While the creatures, spirits, and settings differ, the fundamental purpose remains the same: to navigate uncertainty, mitigate danger, and instill understanding. These stories bridge the gap between imagination and experience, allowing listeners to inhabit the narrative safely while absorbing lessons that endure. As the night deepens, the listener is gently drawn into the rhythm of these tales. The darkness of forest, river, or desert becomes a canvas for imagination, illuminated softly by narrative cadence and imagery. Each story unfolds slowly, encouraging reflection, curiosity, and awareness. Fear becomes fascination. Anxiety transforms into understanding. By the end of this section, the mind has traversed landscapes, both physical and emotional, absorbing lessons encoded in myth while settling into a state of calm, contemplative reflection. In essence, cautionary tales are more than warnings, they are guides. They teach the delicate art of navigating life's uncertainties, blending the terror of darkness with the reassurance of structured knowledge. They transform nightmares into gentle teachers, allowing listeners to engage with fear safely, imaginatively, and meaningfully. They reveal the human ability to take the unknown and shape it into narrative wisdom. Through these tales, we begin to perceive the intricate dance between fear and fascination, danger and guidance, darkness and light. They remind us that even in the shadowy corners of imagination, there is beauty, insight, and enduring human creativity. And as we carry these lessons forward, we prepare to enter the next chapter of our journey, into the realm of forgotten gods, hidden powers, and the subtle magic that has shaped civilizations long vanished, yet whose stories remain alive in the quiet folds of imagination. In the quiet corners of human imagination, gods once walked among mortals, not always visibly, but always profoundly present. They were patrons of cities, guardians of harvests, arbiters of fate, and custodians of the unseen forces that shaped daily life. Across forgotten civilizations, deities embodied human aspirations, fears, and moral frameworks. They were not distant abstractions, but active participants in the unfolding of the world, guiding behavior, shaping societies, and inspiring awe. Their myths persisted not merely as religious doctrine, but as vessels of imagination, wisdom, and wonder. Consider the pantheon of the Hittites, a civilization that flourished in Anatolia thousands of years ago. Their deities were complex, often embodying dualities: life and death, creation and destruction, fertility and drought. Rituals dedicated to these gods blended observation of the natural world with moral instruction, using mythic narratives to communicate essential truths. A story of a storm god might teach respect for environmental forces while simultaneously reminding individuals of the consequences of hubris or neglect. Through these tales, the divine became a mirror for human consciousness, reflecting both fear and aspiration. The roles of forgotten gods were often intertwined with the natural world. Rivers, mountains, and forests were imbued with divinity, as were celestial bodies like the sun, moon, and stars. In ancient Egypt, deities such as Sobuk, the crocodile god, symbolized both danger and protection in the Nile. In pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, gods associated with rain, maize, or the underworld guided the rhythms of agriculture, life, and death. These myths were not abstract theology, they were practical guides, embedding essential knowledge in narrative form. They instructed communities how to live in harmony with the forces around them, while imbuing daily life with sacred significance. Many forgotten deities embody paradoxes. A god might offer fertility and abundance, while also demanding sacrifice, embodying creation and destruction in a single figure. This duality mirrors human experience: joy and suffering, growth and decay, hope and loss. Such narratives taught that life is a balance of opposing forces, that respect, humility, and reflection are essential to navigating existence. In listening to these myths, we recognize that divine figures served as ethical frameworks, cultural mirrors, and imaginative companions simultaneously. In addition to instructing, gods inspired wonder. Tales of divine exploits, battles among deities, journeys to the underworld, or cosmic creation invited audiences to inhabit a universe far larger than themselves. The rhythm of storytelling, with pauses, repetition, and vivid imagery, encouraged reflection rather than anxiety. The imagination could wander safely, exploring realms of power, morality, and beauty. In this way, forgotten gods became guides to understanding both the world and the self, shaping inner landscapes as much as outer ones. Ritual practice further reinforced these divine narratives. Festivals, offerings, and ceremonies brought gods into the daily life of the community, blending sensory experience with mythic imagination. The sounds of drums, chants, or bells, the flicker of firelight, and the scent of incense all created an immersive environment in which the divine became palpable. Even centuries later, imagining these rituals evokes a hypnotic rhythm, suitable for reflection and restful attention. The listener is transported not merely to distant civilizations, but into the sensory and spiritual landscapes in which myths were lived and experienced. The symbolism encoded in divine myths is strikingly rich. Gods often personified natural phenomena, human virtues, or existential questions. A storm god could teach about respect for nature. A goddess of fertility could convey cycles of birth and renewal. An underworld deity could illuminate human mortality and the inevitability of change. Each myth is layered, blending observation, morality, and imagination into a seamless narrative tapestry. By engaging with these stories, listeners can explore complex ideas and emotions in a gentle, meditative way. Many of these deities faded from collective memory, their names and rituals lost to time, yet their influence persists in subtle ways. Some appear in folklore or hybrid forms, while others survive in motifs, symbols, or moral lessons embedded in stories that have transcended cultural boundaries. The persistence of divine archetypes across disparate cultures suggests the human imagination consistently seeks to personify and interpret the forces shaping life, even when civilizations vanish. These echoes carry both historical insight and timeless fascination, whispering across centuries into the present. Forgotten gods also often occupy liminal spaces. They dwell at thresholds between life and death, sky and earth, mortal and divine. By inhabiting these boundaries, they teach humans to navigate uncertainty, to respect forces beyond comprehension, and to find meaning in the unknown. A goddess of the underworld may appear frightening at first, yet she ultimately represents transformation and guidance, showing that even darkness can hold wisdom. In this sense, divine myths operate like meditative exercises, leading the mind through fear, curiosity, and reflection toward insight and calm. The imagery of these myths is richly evocative. Picture a moonlit temple, carved from stone and adorned with symbols that resonate with ancient devotion. Imagine a procession winding through a mist-covered valley, incense rising, drums echoing, and voices chanting names of gods whose forms are both terrifying and sublime. These scenes invite the imagination to inhabit a space where history, ritual, and story converge. The listener's mind, guided by narrative rhythm and visual detail, can explore these sacred landscapes gently, as though drifting through the soft shadows of the past. In many myths, gods interact directly with humans, testing, rewarding, or punishing according to moral or spiritual principles. These interactions encode lessons about behavior, respect, and humility. A mortal who disrespects a god may suffer misfortune, while one who acts with wisdom or reverence may receive protection or insight. These narratives illustrate the delicate interplay of free will and cosmic influence, teaching that human actions are significant even in the face of greater forces. By listening to these myths, we engage with the eternal tension between agency and destiny, fear and reverence, curiosity and caution. The narrative techniques of divine myths also enhance their hypnotic, sleep-friendly quality. Repetition, cadence, and detailed imagery allow the mind to visualize without stress. A god's journey across the cosmos, a ritual enactment in a sun-dappled temple, or a quiet conversation between deity and mortal unfolds slowly, allowing imagination to fill the spaces, cultivating both curiosity and tranquility. These stories do not rush. They linger, permitting reflection and gentle engagement with profound concepts. Even forgotten gods reveal a spectrum of emotional resonance. Some are stern, demanding, or wrathful. Others are gentle, nurturing, or protective. Some teach through direct action, others through allegory and symbolism. The combination of awe and subtle guidance engages the listener in a meditative dance, balancing attention and relaxation. This duality, recurring across cultures, demonstrates the human mind's capacity to explore complex moral, psychological, and spiritual dimensions within narrative frameworks. As night deepens and the mind grows quiet, these divine figures remain as companions in imagination. They inhabit thresholds of consciousness, teaching that the unseen has power, wisdom, and beauty. By exploring forgotten gods, we gain insight into human history, morality, and creativity, while also cultivating a reflective state suitable for rest. Each myth becomes a soft illumination, guiding the mind gently through shadow and light, awe and understanding, curiosity and contemplation. Through this exploration, we begin to perceive the enduring power of forgotten deities. Though their names may no longer be spoken in daily life, their stories continue to echo, offering lessons in morality, humility, and wonder. They remind us that human imagination has always sought to connect with forces greater than ourselves, to make sense of the unknown, and to find beauty in both light and darkness. The gods, though lost to history, linger softly in our minds, inviting reflection, curiosity, and calm reverie. In this section, we have journeyed among gods who inhabit shadowed valleys, sunlit temples, and celestial realms. We have seen their paradoxical nature, their moral instruction, and their enduring influence on human thought. By engaging with these myths in a slow, meditative rhythm, the listener is guided into a contemplative, restful state, ready to continue the journey into monsters, spirits, and hidden wisdom in the chapters that follow. This section explores the monstrous figures of forgotten cultures, creatures that embody fear, morality, and natural or spiritual hazards. Through contrast between light and darkness, known and unknown, it examines how monsters were used to teach caution, encode environmental knowledge, and reflect human psychology. The narrative immerses listeners in the slow, meditative contemplation of these legendary beings, balancing tension and fascination for a sleep-friendly storytelling experience. Monsters have always lived at the edge of human imagination, occupying spaces that are both terrifying and instructive. They are the embodiments of danger, mystery, and moral consequence, often arising in the stories of cultures whose knowledge of the natural world was intertwined with mythology. To ancient peoples, these creatures were more than fantasy. They were warnings, guides, and reflections of the anxieties and challenges of daily life. Across forests, rivers, mountains, and deserts, monsters roamed mythic landscapes, offering lessons cloaked in fear, curiosity, and wonder. Consider the creatures of Mesoamerican myth, where jaguar spirits and feathered serpents embodied both natural and supernatural power. The jaguar, a predator of the dense jungle, became a symbol of strength, cunning, and the unknown. The feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, blended divine and monstrous attributes, teaching respect for the forces that govern life while inspiring reverence for the spiritual and moral order. These myths illustrate a central function of monsters. They encode knowledge, survival strategies, and ethical frameworks into imaginative narrative, allowing listeners to confront fears safely and reflectively. In Europe, monstrous figures like the kraken, trolls, or forest spirits were not mere fabrications. They reflected the real dangers of the environment. Coastal communities feared the vast, unknown ocean, while dense forests hid predators and treacherous terrain. Monsters became symbolic extensions of these hazards, their exaggerated forms magnifying human perception of risk. By embodying threats in a tangible, narrative form, myths transformed fear into instruction, embedding lessons about caution, preparation, and respect for the world. Monsters are often morally complex. They do not exist solely to terrify. They also test humans, reward courage, or serve as mirrors to human flaws. The Japanese Oni, for example, could punish the wicked or protect sacred boundaries, depending on behavior and circumstance. Similarly, African myths describe river spirits or shape-shifting beasts that test travelers' humility and wisdom. In each case, the monstrous figure mediates between human action and cosmic consequence, reinforcing ethical norms while inviting imaginative engagement. The psychological function of monsters is profound. By giving form to abstract fears, death, illness, natural disaster, or social transgression, myths externalize anxiety and transform it into narrative exploration. A child told of a river monster learns caution around waterways. A villager warned of a shadowy forest beast develops vigilance in navigation and survival. Beyond practical lessons, monsters symbolize inner struggles, greed, pride, anger, or envy. Encountering these beings through story allows humans to reflect on their own emotions, fears, and choices in a safe, imaginative context. Monsters also inhabit liminal spaces, thresholds, caves, riverbanks, crossroads, where the ordinary world meets the extraordinary. These settings amplify the sense of mystery, danger, and possibility. A dark cave might house a giant serpent. A crossroads may summon a trickster spirit. By situating monsters in these transitional spaces, myths teach that life is navigated through thresholds, where knowledge, caution, and intuition must coexist. The liminality of monsters mirrors the liminality of human experience, moments of transition, uncertainty, and decision-making. The visual and sensory imagery of monsters enhances their hypnotic effect. Imagine a flickering torch illuminating jagged cave walls, shadows dancing and reshaping themselves into monstrous forms. Picture a fog-laden forest, the wind carrying the whisper of unseen teeth and claws. These images invite the imagination to wander slowly, balancing tension with curiosity, fear with fascination. In sleep-friendly storytelling, such descriptions are paced carefully, allowing the mind to dwell on texture, rhythm, and atmosphere rather than urgency or alarm. Monsters are often culturally adaptive, reflecting the values, environment, and challenges of the society that imagined them. In Scandinavia, Sea monsters symbolize the vast, unpredictable ocean. In sub-Saharan Africa, shape-shifting animals reflect the balance between human settlements and the wilderness. In Polynesia, supernatural beings encode knowledge about navigation, weather, and social cohesion. Despite geographic and temporal differences, the function of monsters remains consistent: to guide, instruct, and engage the human imagination in reflection and precaution. Many myths of monsters emphasize duality: danger and protection, fear and guidance, destruction and renewal. A serpent that threatens crops may also guard sacred water. A beast that haunts the forest may reward cleverness or bravery. This balance mirrors the human understanding of the natural world. Forces are neither entirely benevolent nor wholly malevolent, but must be approached with awareness, respect, and wisdom. Monsters teach discernment, attention, and humility, encouraging humans to navigate life thoughtfully and cautiously. The auditory and rhythmic qualities of monster tales enhance their sleep-friendly quality. The careful pacing of a story, the slow description of a creature, the whisper of leaves, the echo of distant roars, creates a hypnotic cadence that engages the imagination without overwhelming it. Fear transforms into fascination, suspense into gentle anticipation. The listener is invited to inhabit a world of mystery while remaining safely distant, absorbing lessons embedded in narrative rhythm and imagery. Across myths, monsters serve as cultural memory. They preserve knowledge of real-world hazards, environmental changes, and social norms in a form that is easily transmitted orally. Tales of river beasts, predatory cats, or forest spirits encode both ecological understanding and ethical instruction. By passing these stories across generations, communities ensured survival, social cohesion, and psychological preparedness, while nurturing imagination, creativity, and reflection. Even the most terrifying monsters carry beauty, symbolism, and moral resonance. Their forms are often hybrid, imaginative, and evocative. Serpent wings, glowing eyes, shifting shadows, or immense strength. In this hybridity, humans explore complexity, how fear can coexist with admiration, danger with insight, and destruction with renewal. The monstrous becomes a lens through which the imagination can safely confront profound truths about mortality, morality, and the natural world. In sleep-friendly storytelling, monsters are transformed from threats into companions of reflection. Their stories are paced, detailed, and immersive, inviting the mind to wander through landscapes of shadow and light. Listeners navigate forests, rivers, and mountains, encountering creatures that teach vigilance, curiosity, and respect. Each tale becomes a meditation, balancing fear with fascination, anxiety with understanding, and imagination with calm contemplation. By the end of this exploration, the listener has journeyed across continents, forests, rivers, and mountains, observing monsters that embody cultural memory, psychological insight, and moral guidance. They have understood that fear can be instructive, that danger can teach, and that the unknown need not overwhelm. In the gentle rhythm of myth, monsters transform into guides, whispering lessons that endure across centuries, leading the mind toward reflection, curiosity, and calm. Finally, as night deepens, the monsters fade not into terror, but into soft memory. Their presence lingers at the edges of consciousness, inviting respect for the unknown and contemplation of the unseen. Through them, we understand how imagination, fear, and wisdom have always intertwined, shaping human experience and nurturing reflective thought. Monsters are not merely tales of horror. They are companions on a journey of insight, curiosity, and gentle wonder, perfectly suited for the quiet rhythms of night and imagination. Far to the north, where the sun barely rises in winter and the landscape stretches in endless white, the myths of the Inuit take shape against a backdrop both stark and breathtaking. Here, survival is a delicate negotiation with ice, wind, and the creatures that roam the frozen expanses, and myth is inseparable from life itself. These stories are not written down, yet they are as precise and vital as any map or manual, guiding human behavior through generations. The Arctic is a world of extremes. The cold can kill as surely as hunger. The sea can give as readily as it can take. In this precarious environment, myths offer a framework to navigate both the physical and the spiritual, and to find meaning where the margin for error is perilously thin. Among the most haunting tales is that of Sedna, the sea goddess, whose story embodies betrayal, loss, and the tenuous balance between humans and the natural world. Cast into the icy waters by her own father, she becomes the ruler of all sea creatures, holding the power to grant abundance or famine. Hunters and fishers understand that their respect and ritual offerings can determine their survival. Sedna is neither wholly benevolent nor entirely wrathful. She reflects the unpredictable forces of the ocean, the life-giving and the life-threatening entwined. Through her, the Inuit convey the intimate relationship between human action, moral responsibility, and the natural world, encoding survival and spirituality into a single, haunting narrative. The Arctic landscape itself seems alive within these myths. Icebergs, shifting ridges, and the glint of sunlight on snow become more than scenery. They are characters in a story written by wind, water, and time. Spirits inhabit the land and sea, watching, guiding, and occasionally testing humans who traverse their domains. Shamans act as intermediaries, interpreting signs and negotiating with unseen forces to maintain harmony. In this way, myth is practical as well as poetic. It teaches respect, prudence, and attentiveness while also offering a sense of wonder, transforming the harshest environments into spaces of connection and reflection. The creatures of Arctic mythology often blur the line between reality and the supernatural. The torn faces beneath the ice, the northern lights as dancing spirits, the whisper of animals that may or may not be more than themselves, all serve to remind humans of their place within a larger, animate world. These myths are quiet but intense, subtle in their instruction, yet powerful in their psychological and spiritual impact. Every tale carries a lesson about humility, observation, and respect for forces far greater than human comprehension. In a land where the margin for error is slim, myth becomes a guide, a compass, and a lullaby, softening the harshness of reality with the gentle weight of story. In the long nights of the Arctic winter, when darkness stretches for months and the world feels suspended between time and eternity, the myths of the Inuit come alive in communal storytelling. Around small fires, in the warmth of shelters carved from snow or animal hides, elders recount these tales in a tone that is at once soothing and urgent. They blend the factual and the spiritual, the instructional and the mesmerizing, creating an atmosphere where listeners drift easily between consciousness and dream. It is a storytelling style designed not just to entertain, but to embed knowledge, morality, and caution into memory, ensuring that both survival and tradition are passed down through generations. As the wind rises and the ice creaks beneath its weight, one can almost sense the ghosts of these stories drifting across the frozen landscape, guiding and observing. The Arctic, though silent to the casual observer, vibrates with the energy of myth, a quiet, persistent presence that shapes perception, behavior, and imagination. Through Sedna and the spirits of ice and sea, the Inuit have crafted a worldview that merges pragmatism with poetry, fear with reverence, and survival with awe. These tales endure, whispered across generations, soft enough to lull the listener into reflection, yet haunting enough to linger in memory long after the story has ended. And so, standing at the edge of this frozen world, we are invited to listen and learn. The myths are more than stories. They are lifelines, teaching humans how to live in harmony with an unforgiving yet beautiful environment. In their quiet power lies a meditation on the fragility of life, the majesty of nature, and the enduring human need to understand the unknown. As night envelopes the Arctic, the stories drift into the silence, carrying with them the wisdom, wonder, and haunting beauty of a people who have long known that survival is entwined with respect for forces beyond sight, and that myth itself is a map for navigating both the physical and spiritual realms. Long before the rise of cities and empires in the Arabian Peninsula, the desert itself was alive with stories, its vast sands concealing both danger and wonder. In these pre-Islamic lands, known as the Jazeera and its surrounding regions, the people spoke of beings formed not from flesh and bone, but from a subtler, invisible element, smokeless fire. The jinn, as they were called, inhabited deserts, oases, and even the fringes of human settlements, their presence felt in flickers of movement, gusts of wind, and the inexplicable stirrings that no human could fully explain. These myths were not idle entertainment. They were a necessary guide for navigating a world that was as unpredictable as it was harsh. Respect for the unseen became a tool for survival, and storytelling became a way to render the unknowable perceptible, if only through caution and imagination. The jinn were neither wholly benevolent nor entirely malevolent. They could guard wells and caravans, bringing protection to the careful and the respectful. Yet, they could also unleash misfortune, leading travelers astray or sowing discord among tribes. Tales told of bargains made with these beings, often at a personal cost, highlighting the delicate balance between human agency and the capricious will of forces beyond comprehension. The desert itself was a character in these stories, alive, aware, and intertwined with the jinn. To cross a dune or camp by an oasis without honoring these spirits was to risk not just inconvenience, but life itself. These narratives were practical in origin, yet rich in imagination, blending survival strategies with the ethereal, turning the desert into a canvas for moral, spiritual, and cosmic reflection. The pre-Islamic Arabian myths also explore the liminality of existence, the spaces between day and night, life and death, the known and the unknown. The jinn inhabit thresholds, the shadowed corners of tents, the heat mirages shimmering over sand, the whispers that rise with the wind. They are the embodiment of ambiguity, forces that remind humans of their own fragility and the impermanence of control. In some stories, they teach lessons about greed, pride, and humility. In others, they offer glimpses of hidden knowledge or aid those who honor the laws of respect and ritual. Through these tales, the desert becomes both a landscape and a character, a teacher of patience, observation, and reverence. What makes these myths particularly haunting is their intimacy with human life. Unlike distant gods who sit in celestial courts, the jinn walk beside humans in ways that are at once subtle and unavoidable. They are present in everyday actions, from the caravan crossing a night desert to the water drawn from a well. Stories are careful to encode patterns of behavior, when to speak, when to offer, when to retreat. Oral traditions ensured that every member of a community internalized these practices, blending ritual, morality, and the metaphysical into a single, living system. The desert's silence amplifies their presence, making the listener hyper-aware of every sound and movement, and heightening the sense that myth is not merely imagined, but encountered. As the sun sets and the heat fades, the desert transforms. Shadows stretch long over the dunes, and a sense of quiet mystery envelopes every ridge and valley. The moon rises, casting silver across the sands, and the desert seems to breathe, alive with stories that have traveled for centuries. In this liminal space, the jinn are most palpable, their presence suggested in the hush between footsteps, in the ripple of shifting sand, and in the faint whisper of wind through rock and dune. The myths act as both guide and warning, a soft but persistent reminder that the world is not solely ours to command, and that respect for the invisible is as vital as skill or strength. Listening to these ancient tales now, we are invited into a meditation on balance, humility, and wonder. The jinn are neither monsters nor mere folklore. They are metaphors for the unseen forces that shape life, teaching humans to navigate uncertainty with grace and attentiveness. Their myths are quiet but potent, full of shadows and light, danger and guidance, echoing across the centuries with a haunting clarity. And as night deepens over the endless dunes, we can almost feel the desert's breath, carrying the whispers of pre-Islamic Arabia, the soft murmur of jinn, and the eternal lesson that the unknown is never absent, only waiting for those who are ready to listen. Beneath the vast skies of Australia, where the red earth stretches endlessly and the horizon shimmers in heat and distance, there exists a world older than memory, older than written history. Here, the Aboriginal peoples speak of the Dreamtime, a concept that transcends the boundary between myth and reality, past and present, spirit and land. The dreaming is not a story frozen in time. It is a living, breathing framework for understanding existence itself. Every rock, every tree, every winding river carries its own story, its own songline, tracing the journeys of ancestral beings who shaped the land, taught the laws, and left behind an intricate web of connection between humans, nature, and spirit. Listening to these myths is to enter a universe where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and the unseen is as palpable as the earth beneath one's feet. In Aboriginal mythology, the rainbow serpent coils through rivers and valleys, bringing life, rain, and fertility, yet also wielding the power of destruction when its paths are disrespected. The Sky Women and the Wawilak sisters traverse mountains and plains, creating patterns of law, kinship, and morality that persist in the land itself. These beings are not distant gods, aloof from human concerns. They are intimate, active participants in the world, their presence encoded in landscape, ceremony, and song. Each myth functions as both narrative and guide, instructing listeners in the sacred responsibilities owed to the land and to each other. The line between spiritual instruction and practical knowledge is seamless, creating a worldview where ethics, ecology, and imagination are inextricably linked. The transmission of these stories is as vital as the stories themselves. Through song, dance, and ritual performance, Aboriginal communities maintain a living archive of knowledge. Storytelling is not merely entertainment. It is a means of teaching, remembering, and maintaining harmony between people and the land. The ceremonial dances echo the movements of ancestral beings, mapping creation across space and time, while songs trace the journeys of these entities across terrain that is both physical and spiritual. Every participant becomes a living link in a chain that stretches back countless generations, ensuring that the myths remain vibrant, adaptable, and deeply embedded in the culture's consciousness. In this way, myth becomes a vehicle for survival as well as a repository for wonder. The Dreamtime also emphasizes the continuum of existence, where past, present, and future are interconnected. Unlike linear narratives common in other traditions, Aboriginal myths operate in cycles, reflecting the rhythms of nature and the constancy of change. A river carved by ancestral footsteps, a mountain ridge shaped by song, a cave painted with ochre and charcoal. All are active, ongoing presences that carry forward the energy and lessons of the dreaming. To hear these stories is to sense the flow of time differently, to understand that creation is not a singular event, but an ongoing process, one in which humans are active participants rather than passive observers. This philosophy instills both humility and agency, highlighting the deep responsibility humans have toward the world around them. The landscape itself becomes a storyteller. In the flickering light of dusk, the shadows of rock formations and the red dust of desert plains seem to animate with the movements of ancestral beings. The constellations above mirror the journeys on Earth, a celestial map reflecting the terrestrial one. In these narratives, morality, survival, and spirituality intertwine seamlessly with wonder, shaping a culture whose understanding of existence is holistic and profound. Every element of the environment, from the smallest stone to the vast sky, carries meaning, inviting reflection on the deep interconnections that sustain life. As night deepens over the bush, a quiet rhythm settles, echoing the heartbeat of the dreaming itself. Listening to these stories, one can feel the world breathe in concert with the myths, the land alive with memory, presence, and intention. There is a haunting beauty in this continuity, a reminder that myths are not merely relics of the past, but living, guiding forces, shaping perception, morality, and imagination. Through the Dreamtime, the Aboriginal peoples reveal that the earth itself is a canvas for eternal stories, and that every act of remembrance, every song, every dance, every whispered recounting, is a thread in the vast tapestry of life, spirit, and cosmic memory. In the hush of the night, under an expanse of stars that has watched over generations, these myths invite us to slow, to listen, and to feel the pulse of a world both ancient and immediate. The dreaming whispers that we are part of a continuum, a chain that links the seen and unseen, the human and the divine, the ephemeral and the eternal. As we drift towards sleep, the stories linger, soft and haunting, shaping the imagination, instilling wonder, and carrying the listener across deserts, rivers, and plains into a world where myth and life are inseparable, eternal companions in the quiet journey of consciousness. High in the mist-shrouded mountains of Peru, where the clouds drift like ghosts through jagged peaks and ancient terraces cling to cliffs as if holding on to memory itself, the myths of the Inca and their predecessors weave a tapestry of wonder, reverence, and cosmic order. Here, civilization flourished at the edge of the sky, its people attuned to the rhythms of the earth, the passage of the sun, and the subtle signals of the stars. Every stone wall, every aqueduct, and every temple was both functional and symbolic, a testament to a culture that lived in constant dialogue with the spiritual forces they believed shaped existence. Their myths, passed down through oral tradition and ritual, were not idle tales. They were living frameworks for understanding the cycles of life, the sacredness of the land, and humanity's place within a vast, ordered cosmos. At the heart of Inca mythology is Pachamama, the earth goddess, whose essence flows through every mountain, river, and field. She nurtures crops, sustains life, and embodies the delicate balance between abundance and scarcity. Offerings of food, coca leaves, and ceremonial drink honor her, maintaining harmony between humans and the natural world. But Pachamama is not simply benevolent. She demands respect and mindfulness. Failure to honor her or to act with integrity could result in drought, famine, or disaster. A vivid reminder of the inseparability of myth, morality, and survival. In this way, the Incan worldview is both practical and profoundly poetic, embedding guidance for daily life within the language of the sacred. Other myths populate the highlands with beings whose presence bridges earth, sky, and the unseen. Viracocha, the great creator, emerges from the waters to shape humanity, teaching laws and civilization before withdrawing to the horizon, leaving humans to navigate life under the guidance of his creations. Mountains themselves are considered living ancestors, apis, whose spirits watch over villages and travelers. Each peak, each valley carries a story, a sacred history encoded in both geography and ritual practice. In this culture, myth is inseparable from landscape. To walk the Andes is to move through a world alive with the footsteps, songs, and spirits of ancestors. The Incan myths also emphasize cycles of sun, moon, seasons, and life itself. Ceremonial calendars, such as the Inti Raymi festival, align with solstices and equinoxes, reinforcing the connection between human activity and cosmic rhythm. These stories teach attentiveness, patience, and the recognition that life is a series of interdependent forces, both visible and invisible. Creation, fertility, death, and renewal are not abstract concepts, but lived experiences, deeply embedded in the spiritual consciousness of the people. Every ritual, every tale, every observation of the natural world is a reflection of this intricate web, blending practicality, reverence, and awe. Walking through the ruins of Machu Picchu or exploring lesser-known terraces and ceremonial sites, one senses the resonance of myth in stone and soil. Even centuries after the height of the Inca, the stories endure, soft yet persistent, shaping the imagination and evoking a connection to a worldview that honors the unity of life, spirit, and land. The myths invite contemplation. The mountains are not inert, the rivers not silent, the wind not empty. All are part of a living narrative that teaches, warns, and inspires. They bridge the temporal gap, connecting us to a civilization whose understanding of the universe was as practical as it was poetic. As night falls over the Andes, the mountains dissolve into shadow and mist, and the stars emerge in a sky unpolluted by modern light. The myths of Pachamama, Viracocha, and the Apis rise softly with the night wind, a gentle chorus of guidance, memory, and wonder. Listening to these stories is to step into a world where humans are participants, not masters, of a vast, living cosmos. The narratives linger, haunting and luminous, carrying the essence of a people who understood that the sacred is intertwined with the ordinary, that survival depends on attentiveness to unseen forces, and that myth is a bridge, gentle, enduring, and eternal, between human life and the mysteries of the universe. Along the rugged coastlines and deep fjords of Scandinavia, where winter nights stretch endlessly and the aurora dances in the sky like the breath of forgotten spirits, the myths of the Norse people emerge, etched in memory and carved into runes that have survived centuries of time and storm. These stories are steeped in both beauty and terror, a reflection of a landscape that is as harsh and unpredictable as it is magnificent. Mountains rise like silent guardians, forests conceal shadows both real and imagined, and seas rage with currents that can claim the unwary. In such a world, mythology is not mere entertainment. It is survival, philosophy, and a means of understanding existence. The Norse myths are guides for living amidst uncertainty, offering lessons on courage, humility, and the ever-present balance between chaos and order. Central to these narratives is the pantheon of gods who embody both human and cosmic qualities. Odin, the all-seeing, all-knowing, and ever-curious god, sacrifices and searches for wisdom, reminding mortals that knowledge demands cost and that understanding comes not from comfort, but from struggle. Thor, the Thunderer, wields his hammer to protect gods and humans alike, a force of strength and justice that mirrors the unpredictable power of nature itself. Loki, the Trickster, embodies ambiguity, chaos, and cunning, reminding listeners that the world is rarely simple, that cleverness can both save and destroy. Each deity is a reflection of human traits magnified into cosmic scale, teaching through example and caution, shaping morality, courage, and strategy in a harsh and complex world. The myths are also deeply entwined with the landscape itself. Mountains, rivers, forests, and seas are not inert. They are inhabited by Jotnar, elves, and spirits whose intentions range from helpful to deadly. Human activity interacts continuously with these forces. Hunting, farming, and traveling are all acts subject to unseen oversight. The harsh winters and sudden storms are interpreted as expressions of these beings' moods, embedding environmental awareness into myth. These narratives blend the tangible and intangible, creating a worldview where human survival is dependent not only on skill but on respect, foresight, and harmony with forces beyond sight or control. One of the most haunting aspects of Norse mythology is its deep engagement with fate and the inevitability of change. Ragnarok, the prophesied end of the world, looms over all other stories, a reminder that even gods are not exempt from destiny. Civilizations rise and fall, seasons change, and life and death cycle in a continuum that is both frightening and strangely comforting. The myths encourage courage in the face of inevitable endings, valor in confronting the unknown, and wisdom in preparing for what cannot be avoided. They teach that understanding the fragility and impermanence of life is itself a form of mastery, an art of navigating existence amidst uncertainty. The preservation of these myths through oral storytelling, poetry, and runes reflects the Norse dedication to memory and tradition. Skalds recited sagas, blending history, legend, and moral instruction into narratives that captivated and guided communities. These tales were passed around fires and across long winter nights, their rhythm and repetition making them both memorable and meditative. Listening to these stories was an immersive experience. One could feel the cold of the fjords, the weight of snow on branches, the thrill of storm-tossed seas, and the ever-present gaze of gods and spirits. The myths created a landscape of imagination overlaid upon the physical world, guiding thought, action, and ethical reflection simultaneously. As darkness falls across icy peaks and the northern lights shimmer overhead, the myths rise softly, like mist curling through the valleys. They remind us that life is fragile, that courage and wisdom are essential, and that the universe is filled with unseen forces whose patterns we must respect and learn to read. The Norse myths are haunting yet instructive, blending beauty with peril, light with shadow, and the known with the unknowable. In listening, we step into a world where human experience is inseparable from cosmic order, where every act carries consequence, and where myth itself is a bridge, both protective and enlightening, across the vast, mysterious expanse of life. And so, standing in imagination amidst snow-laden forests, roaring seas, and shadowed mountains, we hear the echoes of Odin, Thor, Loki, and the Jotnar. Their stories drift through the cold night air, soft and compelling, offering guidance, awe, and a quiet reminder that even in a world of relentless forces, human courage, insight, and connection to the unseen endure. The myths linger, haunting and luminous, weaving history, morality, and mystery into a tapestry that continues to captivate, instruct, and gently guide the listener into the quiet hours of reflection and dream. In the mist-draped forests of Ireland and Scotland, where ancient stones rise like sentinels and the wind carries whispers through the heather, the myths of the Celtic peoples unfold in layers both luminous and shadowed. Here, the veil between the seen and unseen is thin, and stories of heroes, gods, and spirits permeate the landscape, entwined with the rhythm of life itself. Rivers, hills, and sacred groves are not merely settings. They are living participants in the narratives, shaping events and reflecting the moods of the supernatural. To listen to these myths is to step into a world where the ordinary and extraordinary coexist seamlessly, where moral guidance and wonder are inseparable, and where the line between reality and dream bends under the weight of imagination. Central to Celtic mythology are the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, whose presence imbues the land with power, mystery, and a sense of sacred continuity. These beings embody wisdom, artistry, and martial skill, their stories chronicling not only battles and heroics, but the deeper lessons of respect, balance, and the cyclical nature of life. Each myth carries multiple layers, a literal tale of events, a symbolic guide to living harmoniously with others and with the land, and a spiritual reflection of human aspirations and fears. The Tuatha De Danann are not distant or abstract. They walk among humans in story, teaching and challenging, their footprints visible in rivers, hills, and the lingering magic of the natural world. The Celtic world is haunted by spirits that are as gentle as they are formidable. The Sidhe, often described as inhabitants of hills or mounds, possess a duality, capable of offering blessing or mischief depending on human behavior. Encounters with these beings are laden with lessons: patience, humility, attentiveness, and the recognition that small actions can carry great consequences. Fairies, shapeshifters, and guardian spirits all reflect the mysterious interplay between human intention and natural or spiritual law. Life is a delicate negotiation, and the myths serve as both warning and guide, embedding in memory the moral and practical frameworks necessary for thriving in a world suffused with the unseen. Celtic myths also celebrate the intertwining of mortality and eternity, heroism and consequence. The tales of Cu Chulainn, with his remarkable feats and tragic destiny, exemplify the tension between human valor and the inevitability of fate. Similarly, the story of the Salmon of Knowledge conveys the importance of patience, learning, and the transformative power of experience. These narratives are not static. They shift and flow with each telling, maintaining relevance across centuries and landscapes. In their fluidity, they mirror the natural world itself. Rivers that carve valleys, winds that shape mountains, forests that grow and recede, embedding human lessons in the very patterns of life. The transmission of these myths is a delicate and artful process. Bards and storytellers, moving between villages and courts, preserved history, morality, and imagination through song, poetry, and oral performance. Each recitation was an immersive experience, drawing listeners into the rhythms of speech, the cadence of events, and the vibrant life of the characters. Through these performances, communities maintained a living connection to their past, their landscape, and the moral frameworks that guided social cohesion and respect for the environment. The stories were both entertainment and education, weaving practical knowledge and spiritual insight into a form that could be both absorbed and cherished. As twilight descends over ancient stone circles and windswept glens, the myths of the Celts rise softly with the evening air. They speak of honor and folly, life and death, love and vengeance, courage and consequence. Yet there is a subtlety to their haunting. They do not impose fear through spectacle alone, but through the quiet weight of presence, the inevitability of fate, and the enduring lesson that the world is alive with unseen forces that demand awareness and respect. The land itself becomes a narrator, echoing the deeds, choices, and wisdom of heroes, gods, and spirits, ensuring that every hill, river, and mound carries memory forward across generations. In these quiet hours, as darkness settles and the landscape fades into shadow, the Celtic myths linger in the mind like a gentle, haunting melody. They invite reflection, empathy, and reverence, offering guidance through both the ordinary and extraordinary moments of life. The Tuatha De Danann, the Sidhe, the heroes and tricksters all speak softly, reminding us that the unseen is real, that every action resonates, and that imagination and morality are intertwined. Listening to these stories is to feel the pulse of an ancient world, to sense the enduring presence of myth in shaping thought, behavior, and wonder, and to drift into the night accompanied by whispers of a land where magic, history, and human experience have always been inseparable. Across the arid landscapes and hidden valleys of Egypt, where the Nile winds like a silver thread through deserts that have witnessed millennia, the myths of the ancient Egyptians unfold with a majesty and precision unmatched in human history. These stories are woven into the very fabric of daily life, architecture, and ritual, forming a universe where gods, humans, and nature coexist in a delicate balance. The desert and river, sun and sky, life and death, all are interconnected, their rhythms mirrored in myth, guiding moral conduct, societal order, and personal destiny. Egyptian mythology is not merely a collection of fanciful tales. It is a comprehensive framework for understanding existence, a reflection of cosmic order, and a meditation on the impermanence and continuity of life. Central to these myths is the pantheon of deities who embody forces both natural and moral. Ra, the sun god, traverses the sky each day in his celestial boat, sustaining life and symbolizing the relentless passage of time. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, teaches that death is not an end, but a transformation, a continuation of the soul's journey governed by justice and ritual. Isis, with her boundless devotion and wisdom, intervenes to restore balance, heal the wounded, and guide the living and dead alike. These deities are intimately involved with human affairs, and their stories convey lessons in morality, perseverance, and the consequences of actions. Myth and daily life are inseparable, each reinforcing the other in a cycle of reverence, observance, and reflection. The Egyptians also envisioned a world teeming with spirits, demons, and cosmic entities that mirrored human and natural forces. The chaotic serpent Apep threatened Ra's journey each night, representing the ever-present possibility of disorder, while protective spirits and animal deities ensured the survival and prosperity of the living. Myth served as both a warning and a guide. Respect for the gods, the environment, and social obligations ensured alignment with cosmic harmony, whereas neglect or hubris could invite calamity. Every ritual, from temple offerings to elaborate funerary rites, reinforced these lessons, embedding the wisdom of myth into practical, observable actions that shaped the continuity of society across generations. Egyptian myths are also steeped in cycles, reflecting the rhythms of nature and the cosmos. The flooding of the Nile, the movement of stars, the passage of seasons, all are mirrored in myth, reinforcing a worldview that integrates observation with spiritual meaning. The story of Isis and Osiris, for instance, parallels the cycles of fertility, growth, death, and rebirth, teaching that destruction is not final, and that renewal follows even the deepest loss. Such narratives offer both solace and instruction, embedding ethical, ecological, and cosmic awareness within compelling tales that resonate on both emotional and intellectual levels. Myth becomes a living tool, a lens through which the world can be understood and navigated with care, respect, and wonder. The permanence of Egyptian mythology is perhaps most vividly expressed in their monumental architecture. Temples, pyramids, and tombs were not merely physical structures. They were inscriptions in stone of myth, law, and cosmic order. Hieroglyphs and reliefs depict gods, pharaohs, and symbolic scenes that continue to communicate wisdom, narrative, and aesthetic beauty thousands of years later. To walk through these sacred spaces is to feel immersed in a world where myth governs reality, where every shadow, every ray of sunlight, every reflection on stone carries meaning. Even today, standing before the Sphinx or the temples of Karnak, one senses the living presence of these ancient stories, soft yet inexorable, guiding the imagination and illuminating the mind. As night falls over the Nile and the desert cools into shadow, the myths of Egypt reveal their haunting elegance. They speak of creation, destruction, transformation, and the eternal struggle to maintain balance in a universe governed by both order and chaos. Listening to these stories, one feels the deliberate rhythm of a civilization that revered the sacred, observed the cycles of life, and understood the intricate connection between human behavior and cosmic consequence. The myths endure not merely as tales, but as living reflections of a worldview that embrace complexity, mystery, and beauty, inviting contemplation and meditation even across millennia. In the quiet hours beneath a sky crowded with stars that once guided sailors, priests, and dreamers alike, Egyptian myths drift softly into the mind. They remind us that life is fleeting yet meaningful, that the unseen is as vital as the tangible, and that every act, however small, resonates within a larger cosmic pattern. Through these ancient tales, we glimpse a civilization attuned to the rhythms of both nature and spirit, where myth is at once guide, moral compass, and hauntingly beautiful lullaby. In listening, we are transported across deserts, along the banks of Nile, and into the eternal cycles of life, death, and renewal, a timeless journey that continues to captivate, instruct, and gently soothe the mind as it drifts toward rest. In the dense jungles and towering temples of Mesoamerica, where sunlight filters through thick canopies and the air vibrates with the hum of life, the myths of the Maya and Aztec civilizations unfold with a richness and complexity that has fascinated scholars and dreamers for centuries. Here, Myth and history are inseparable, each informing the other in a tapestry of creation, morality, and cosmic order. The pyramids, plazas, and ceremonial ball courts were more than architectural feats. They were embodiments of stories, physical manifestations of beliefs, and instruments for connecting the human to the divine. Every ritual, every carving, every glyph encodes lessons about life, death, and the cycles of the universe, guiding both rulers and common people in their understanding of existence. At the heart of these mythologies are gods and cosmic forces that govern every aspect of life. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, represents creation, knowledge, and the flow of life, while Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, embodies duality, temptation, and the often unseen forces that shape human destiny. The interplay of these deities illustrates a universe where balance is essential, where light and shadow, order and chaos, life and death are in constant negotiation. The myths are not distant tales, but active frameworks that instruct, warn, and inspire, shaping behavior and morality with subtlety and power. Each story carries layers of meaning, accessible to the attentive listener and rich with symbolism for those willing to delve deeper. The Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiche Maya, exemplifies the profound depth of Mesoamerican myth. It recounts the creation of the world, the struggles of the hero twins, and the origins of humanity, weaving together themes of courage, intelligence, fate, and transformation. These narratives are deeply tied to the land. Rivers, mountains, caves, and stars are not merely backdrops, but active participants in the unfolding drama. Myth becomes inseparable from geography, and the landscape itself is imbued with moral and spiritual significance. Every journey through the forest or over the mountains becomes a reflection of the epic journeys of gods and heroes, a living interaction with stories that guide perception and action. Ritual and ceremony are central to the transmission and preservation of these myths. Offerings, dances, and festivals are not merely symbolic. They maintain the delicate balance between humans and the forces that govern life. Blood, maize, and incense are offered not in superstition, but in acknowledgement of interdependence, of respect for the cycles of growth, decay, and renewal. The myths reinforce the idea that humans are not masters of the universe, but participants within it, their fates intertwined with the whims and designs of powerful deities. Through ritualized storytelling, the community internalizes lessons about courage, morality, and humility, and the myths become both lived experience and moral compass. The architecture and art of the Maya and Aztec civilizations further amplify the resonance of myth. Pyramids aligned with solstices, glyphs carved into stele, and painted codices serve as tangible anchors for intangible stories. Every stone, every image, and every glyph is a mnemonic device, a way to encode complex cosmologies into physical forms that endure across centuries. The alignment of temples with celestial events reflects a sophisticated understanding of time, astronomy, and cycles, revealing a worldview in which human activity, natural phenomena, and mythic narrative are all deeply intertwined. Observing these spaces today, one can feel the lingering presence of myth, soft, haunting, and insistent, shaping the imagination and inviting reflection. As twilight falls over ancient plazas and forested temples, the myths of Mesoamerica rise gently in the mind. They speak of creation and destruction, courage and cunning, mortality and the eternal cycles of the cosmos. Listening to these stories, one senses the duality inherent in life itself. The interplay of light and shadow, the visible and invisible, the known and unknowable. The myths linger, guiding thought and reflection while gently drawing the listener into the cadence of ritual, the rhythm of nature, and the quiet contemplation of existence. They are both instruction and meditation, soft enough to soothe, yet vivid enough to inspire curiosity and wonder. In these quiet moments, under a sky where stars once guided priests, farmers, and travelers alike, The stories of Quetzalcoatl, Tezcatlipoca, and the hero twins echo across centuries. They remind us that myth is not simply entertainment, but a bridge between human experience and the vast forces of the universe, a framework for understanding life, morality, and the eternal dance of creation and decay. Through these ancient narratives, the listener is transported into a world where imagination, reverence, and cosmic insight converge, a world that continues to teach, haunt, and gently lull the mind into reflection, meditation, and sleep. As the night deepens, the myths we have explored throughout this journey become gentle companions for the imagination, weaving themselves into the soft fabric of dreams. In this quiet moment, the spirits, monsters, and heroes from forgotten cultures are no longer figures of fear or distant curiosity. They are guides, hovering at the edge of consciousness, offering comfort and quiet fascination. The contrast between light and darkness, known and unknown, fades into a gentle balance, allowing the mind to drift peacefully. Imagine a flickering campfire on a windswept plain, the glow illuminating carved stones, each etched with stories older than memory. In these stories, a shadowy guardian watches over a lost city. A trickster's spirit hides in the corner of a forgotten forest. A wounded god drifts across the night sky. Each of them moves not to frighten, but to whisper lessons about patience, courage, and the resilience of the human spirit. The myths are no longer distant artifacts. They are alive in the rhythm of the night, carrying the subtle music of ancient cultures into the present. As the mind relaxes, we revisit a few familiar faces, the liminal spirits who dwell between worlds, once seen as harbingers of dread, now simply companions at the edge of sleep. The hybrid creatures, once monstrous, now soft shapes that spark curiosity without urgency. The divine beings, whose powers remind us that even the unknown can be beautiful and instructive. Each story merges into the next, creating a slow, undulating cadence, a narrative tide that guides the mind toward rest. The lullaby of forgotten myths is not only in the tales themselves, but in the textures and environments they inhabit. Picture misty mountains where ancient rituals once took place, gentle rivers where spirits of love and loss still linger, or sunken temples that hum quietly beneath calm waters. The natural world becomes a stage for imagination, a space where the mind can wander safely, exploring mystery without anxiety. Every description is soft and deliberate, each sentence a slow exhale designed to invite reflection and mental stillness. In these quiet moments, the line between listener and myth dissolves. You may imagine walking through a forest where the trees themselves seem to hold stories, their leaves whispering secrets of civilizations long gone. You may picture a lone traveler tracing the steps of ancient heroes across a barren desert under a crescent moon, the sand glowing faintly in its own spectral light. These images are carefully paced, allowing the mind to visualize gently, without abruptness or tension, and to sink into a liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. The myths serve as both companions and teachers. They remind us that fear can be gentle, that darkness can illuminate, that the unknown can be comforting when approached slowly and intentionally. The creatures and spirits that once inspired trepidation now guide the mind along a path of introspection and wonder, encouraging a slow release of the day's worries. In their company, imagination becomes a soothing landscape rather than a source of tension. As you breathe and relax, the cadence of these stories mirrors the natural rhythm of night itself. Thoughts settle like dust in the quiet corners of the mind. Curiosity lingers softly, like stars just visible in a fading twilight. The past and present meet in this twilight zone, and myths once forgotten softly unfold, like petals opening in the moonlight, each revealing a subtle lesson or gentle story. In this way, the mind is not forced to chase resolution, but rather drifts with the ebb of narrative, finding comfort in the mystery and the memory of those who came before. In these final moments, You may find yourself imagining the distant drums of ancient rituals, faint and soothing, calling forth stories that have traveled through centuries. You may feel the gentle brush of wind over ancient carvings or the quiet echo of voices long vanished. Each myth whispers its own lullaby, a tapestry of human emotion, imagination, and wonder. They teach that even as civilizations fade, stories endure, carried softly in the rhythm of night, offering guidance, reflection, and gentle intrigue. Finally, as the body relaxes and the eyelids grow heavy, these myths fade not into absence, but into a quiet, comforting presence. Their shadows linger just enough to stimulate imagination, but not enough to disturb the peaceful tide of sleep. The listener is left suspended between curiosity and rest, embraced by the gentle arms of ancient wisdom and quiet mystery. Here, the journey concludes, but the myths continue to hum softly in the mind. Sleep is no longer a void. It is a continuation of the narrative, a space where the lessons, wonders, and mysteries of forgotten cultures mingle with dreams. In the hushed calm of night, the mind surrenders to the gentle rhythm of storytelling, carrying the listener into deep, restorative slumber, guided by the whispers of worlds long past, yet forever alive in the imagination.